I don't mind.
Notice the interruptions. So, go and speak to them. Let them tell you their history. If I am lying, they'll tell you I'm lying. If I'm telling you the truth, they will be able to provide their own sources, their own material, and their own evidence. You can find Assyrian Christians in London. Go to their churches and talk to them. Go and speak to the Coptic Christians of Egypt. You can find their churches in London. Go and speak to them. You can find Greek Christians in London. Go to their churches and speak to them. If I am lying, they will surely tell you I am lying. But if, when you investigate, you find that I'm telling the truth, then see Adnan for what he is, an apologist for supremacism. And if you have to apologize for supremacism because its facts make you uncomfortable, then I say to all of you Muslims and to all of you liberals, change the way you're thinking. Change your beliefs. Adnan asked me 2 questions because he wanted to get off. He wanted to get off the topic as quickly as he could. The witch trials, absolute fact. We did horrendous things, horrendous. But what he didn't tell you, is that it was a localized experience, particularly in France and Austria and southern Germany.
Localized.
What he didn't tell you...
4 countries are localized.
Stop interrupting. Stop interrupting, Adnan. What he didn't tell you is that there was 0 phenomena of witch burning in Eastern Orthodox Christianity. What he didn't tell you when he mentioned the Spanish Inquisition was that the Spanish Inquisition, unlike local secular courts and unlike the courts of the local church, was actually conducted by trained lawyers who never once convicted people of witchcraft. Not once. 0. Why? Because the Spanish Inquisition was conducted not by superstitious laity, but by trained university lawyers who bequeathed to Europe the idea of using evidence in court. Just an example. The Spanish Inquisition, in comparison to other courts at the time, were by far the fairest courts in the land. By far the fairest. They fall greatly short of what we would consider fair today. I don't deny it. But relatively speaking, they were far superior to the superstitious and ill-trained courts that you can compare them to. The Spanish Inquisition treated its prisoners with dignity. There are examples of prisoners in Spanish jails deliberately blaspheming so that they can be transferred to the prisons of the Inquisition, because the Inquisition treated its prisoners with more dignity. Let me tell you what Spanish historians say about the lies that Adnan wants to feed. They call it the Black Legend. That's what they describe it as. The Black Legend, a slur against Spanish Christianity, a slur against Spanish identity. And I'll tell you who propagated those lies. It was a man, a pseudonym writer, called Montanus, writing at the time of the Reformation, who give us this depiction of the Spanish Inquisition as being some horrible, tyrannical movement. Historians today who have collected the case files of the Spanish Inquisition, and the Spanish Inquisition was by far the most well-documented legal proceedings of Spain at the time, have demonstrated
I want everyone to stay to listen to my response to
that
this.
our common perception of the Spanish Inquisition...
The chain ball.
Stop interrupting, Adnan. Stop interrupting,
He's
Adnan.
not going to hear it coming.
Notice, the Spanish Inquisition. Notice the interruptions by the Muslims.
Stop crying about this. Just carry on.
Notice, because I'm going after this.
No. You're going to hear my response?
No, I'm going to go.
You're going to go?
Yeah, I'm going to go.
You can't do that. You have to hear my response and then go. Then we can shake hands as gentlemen and you walk away. Right?
Spanish Inquisition.
As Bob is not a gentleman, he's going to do
The Spanish Inquisition, yes, by our standards today, would fall well short of everything we consider decent or fair. But the claims about the Spanish Inquisition are grossly exaggerated. And it is used as a slur, and it is based on inaccuracies published by reformers during the Reformation 400 years later. Now, ladies and gentlemen, most of you were probably not here at the very beginning. But at the very beginning, I was actually trying to leave the park. I've stayed for over an hour.
The second question. Muslim treatment of Jews and Christians. Second question, nothing.
I will do.
Yeah.
So I've stayed for over an hour because Adnan demanded this debate and I have given him a debate. I'm going to answer his second question and then I am going to leave.
Stay for 5 minutes and go.
So,
stay for 5 minutes and go.
I'll give you 5 minutes and then I'll go.
Yeah.
So, in terms of did Muslims do good things to Christians when they ruled them? I can say hand on heart, absolutely it is a fact that they did.
Accidentally?
No, and deliberately so. Now, hold on 1 second. Hold 1 second. Stop interrupting.
Please.
Notice the interruptions again. All the time.
It's a debate.
Notice the interruption. So, notice the interruption.
Notice
the interruption.
That's why I don't want to.
All the
waste time.
So, the fact that good things were done, and I don't deny it, and that those good things were done deliberately, does not outweigh the grievous criminal acts done against Christians, also deliberately. The good Muslim, bad Muslim argument. It sounds good when you trip off the tongue. However,
so what happened to ISIS?
1400 years.
ISIS Ottoman.
1400 years.
How about the Christian?
Brother, it's a debate. Please be quiet.
Consistent Islamic practice demonstrate that Muslims have consistently believed that their discrimination and persecution of Christians is in some way Islamic, and it is not wrong for me to demonstrate that point. So to speak about my history as a Christian, I am not an Islamophobe for saying so. I am simply a Christian talking about Christian history from a Christian perspective, and it isn't just me that's speaking, it is countless thousands and tens of thousands and millions of Christians who will tell you the same history, because their historians remember it,
spoke for very long.
Our churches remember it, and our culture remembers it in song and poem and writings and history.
And story what?
So,
okay,
5 minutes I give
5
you.
minutes. Now, first of all, let me start with Bob's methodology in research, right? Every time he makes a point, he goes, go and talk to the Armenians. Go and talk to the Greeks. Go and talk to the Germans.
Yes,
go and talk to the English. I can say the same thing. If I want to make an argument, if I came back and every time I made a point, I would say, go and talk to the Moroccans. Go and talk to the Algerians. Go and talk to the Egyptians, Libyans, Tunisians, Pakistanis, Saudis, Yemenis. Likewise, brother, it's a debate. So the point, next point Bob made was, if you want to hear about, brother, can you brother, you drink, right?
We talk about Libya and
Okay. Brother,
Just press on
be
now.
quiet. Yeah.
Just press on.
Yeah. Be quiet, please. Thank you. Okay. So if every time I made a point, instead of quoting academic sources, if I said to you, go and talk to Moroccans, Algerians, and all the way up to Bangladesh, go and talk to every single one of them, if you want to understand history, how would the peasants or mechanics or engineers or even businessmen, how will they tell you about history? History is the work of historians. They will tell you history, okay? And sometimes the masses can be misled, like what's happening in India. The Hindutva, extremist Hindu right-wing government has effectively brainwashed the masses in India. And historians are screaming from the US. There is a historian called Audrey Trush, again, a non-Muslim American historian. She's screaming, and she's one of the most hated persons in India. You know why? She's directly challenging the Indian government and the narrative on the history of India or the Muslim history of India. She's challenging them that you are lying to the masses. So it is very possible for the masses to be brainwashed, like what's happening to the Americans. American masses have been brainwashed. So he wants you to go and talk to the masses, not historians. I want you to go and talk to historians. Now I stand corrected. That the source he quoted on the genocide was indeed published by Harvard University. I have the credibility and integrity to come back and say I stand corrected, right? But what he doesn't tell you, when you read the description of the book, it states, it talks about the genocidal policy of the Turkish government from the period of Sultan Abdul Hamid II, moving on to the Young Turks, when it intensified. Genocide actually intensified during the Young Turks. Young Turks were
But it started with
wait.
But it started with a
Let me,
sultan.
no interruption. The Young Turks were a secular,
Practice what you preach, guys.
anti-Islamicizing group of youngsters who came to power, okay, and they were also called Domne, okay. Domne. This group was called Domne. They were secular Turks who were against Islam and Islamic ruling of the Ottoman Empire. They were the ones who intensified the genocide if they were directly responsible.
Intensified
look. Common decency. I was completely silent. I was telling people to be silent. So Bernard Lewis, on the other hand, I mentioned earlier, disagrees. Academics, they always argue with sources. Some have one opinion, the others have another opinion. Bernard Lewis, who is also a Jewish historian, who believes that it was not the Turkish government, even Young Turks were not behind it. But even if they were, we're not responsible for them. Young Turks were secular. They were more inspired by Western thought than they were by Islamic thought. Why? Because they came to power to de-Islamicize Turkey. And they're the ones who committed the genocide. So you cannot put that genocide in the basket of Islam, put it in the basket of secularism. Okay? And you talked about genocides, and there are genocides taking place today against the Muslims. Iraq war, 3 million Muslims have been killed in Iraq alone since the First World War, and there were Christian priests blessing the soldiers, American soldiers. George Bush, self-confessing Christian, said, God has commanded me to wage this crusade against the Iraqi people. You can't wash your hands. And he talked about witch burning, and they were not done by Eastern Orthodox Church. And then he went on to defending Inquisition. Imagine, brothers and sisters, imagine, today if standing here, I started defending ISIS. God forbid, Allah forbid, if I started doing that, what would you think of me? Tell me honestly, what would you think of me? I'm talking to the crowd. What would you think of me? This guy is either mad or he is an extremist who needs to be in jail. Crazy. Do you agree? Crazy. Do you agree? Crazy. Wait. It's my turn. I abhor groups like ISIS. I call them Khawarij. Okay? And these Islamophobes, previously I had some respect for Bob. But the moment he mentioned the notion that I was supporting extremism, okay, I have lost all respect. No respect anymore. No mercy. He is a liar. He's a liar. You can go. You can go.
Shaking your hand.
No, I don't want to shake your hand.
Now notice.
Don't run away.
No. It's I'm still speaking. I'm still speaking.
stood here
Just go. Just go.
over an hour.
Just go. It's my turn to speak. It's my turn to speak. It's my turn to speak.
And the supremacy.
You can remain silent all that time. Okay. You can remain silent.
Defend it.
Okay. So
Ladies and
you said you were gonna go.
Ladies and
Let me
gentlemen.
finish and then you can go. Or you can talk. Let me finish, you can talk.
Ladies and
Let me
gentlemen.
finish and then you can talk.
The telling word.
Okay.
The telling word was that the genocide of the Syrian Christians was
You said you're gonna go.
under the Sultan. Under the Sultan. Notice how the Dawah let him talk. Let him talk. If you promise him that we have to stand again, let him talk. Let him talk. Don't let him talk because you told him to. Let him talk. Let him talk. What is you? So, let him talk. Let him talk. Last chance. Coward, let him talk. Don't shame out. Okay, let him talk. I'm not shaking it. Yeah, because I called you an apologist for supremacism. Okay, I'm waiting for you to leave. Yeah, if you're going to slur me, do it accurately. I called you an apologist for supremacism. I did not say that you were an Islamist.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
Get it right.
I will continue with my responses. Now, you see, the reason why people like this, take him over. The reason why people like this, there are two types of people who want to see darkness in Islam and Islamic history. Two types of people: ISIS and Islamophobes. Islamophobe includes atheistic extremists like Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, people like that. They're extremists. And even atheists will testify to the fact that they are extremists, right? Like we have Christian missionaries, not all of them, some of them, and you saw one example. These people are extremists. They cannot have any decent discussion with you, right? It's very, very difficult to have a proper discussion with them, okay? And what do you call a decent discussion? A decent discussion is where you actually quote academic sources, objective sources, not apologetic sources. Every single source I quoted was an academic source, okay? He made many points and I rebutted them successfully by quoting reputable academic sources. So coming back to Inquisition, did you notice something? He started to glorify Inquisition. It is no different to glorifying ISIS. In fact, I'll go as far as to say Inquisition was far more evil than ISIS is. Inquisition, if you study an objective history, this is the madness. I cannot believe in these people. It is mad. It is madness to defend an institution like Inquisition that killed hundreds of thousands of people by torturing them to death. Torture. Inquisition was known for torture. He said Inquisition was a very organized institution. There were qualified judges sitting over these trials. It was recorded diligently. Oh my God. And that's the reason why we know about Inquisition, because the records were kept diligently. And when you go and study some objective scholars on Inquisition, not Muslim apologists, again, he kept calling me a Muslim apologist. Why am I a Muslim apologist when I'm giving Western sources to you to go and look into? If I said go and study Ibn Kathir, go and study Muhammad Ali Sallabi, or go and study Adnan Rashid, then I would be an apologist, no doubt. I'm not asking you to do that. Go and study Western academic sources on these issues, and you will see, even the book he mentioned on genocide will highlight the fact that it were Young Turks, a secular group, and then later on Ataturk, who de-Islamicized or de-Islamified Turkey. If Ataturk commits a crime, a man who came to de-Islamify Turkey, Why do you accuse Muslims of his crimes? Is the question. Or Young Turks. So even their own books they quote, he hasn't read one of them. Even every single book he mentioned, he hasn't read any of them. And the ones I mentioned, by the grace of God, I have read most of them. Okay? So Inquisition, if you want to read about Inquisition, pick up the works of Henry Charles Lee. What is the name? Henry Charles Lee, who is an authority on Inquisition. In his works, he discusses what happened to the Muslims after the Catholic monarchs came to power, what Inquisition did to Moriscos. Moriscos were remaining Muslims after the Catholic takeover of Spain. He talks about the doings of Inquisition in Spanish dependencies, and he talks about Inquisition in general. He got the documents from Europe. He was in America. He wrote this history, and that was the achievement of his life. Henry Charles Lee, an authority on Inquisition. When you read his works, and after you listen to people like Bob, you will have two thoughts in mind. Either Bob is no different to ISIS, people we abhor, okay, or he's mad, or he's mad. Wait. He's mad, or he's mad. You cannot possibly in your right mind defend Inquisition. It was Inquisition that burnt William Tyndale at stake. You know, William Tyndale was one of the first translators of the Bible into the English language. You know, again, he kept saying, if you don't believe me, go and check. Go and check what? Go and check what? He kept saying, go and speak to this people or that people. That means you have nothing to say. You have no substance. You have no sources to back your opinions. So, Henry Charles Lee is the man to read on Inquisition, and you will see what I'm talking about. Okay? So, the final point before I came to this was, there was a final point I was mentioning. I forgot. Yes, William Tyndale. Who was William Tyndale? William Tyndale was a man who translated the New Testament from Greek into English in the time of Henry VIII, the Tudor king who governed Britain. And he was on the run. Why? What was his crime? He translated the Bible into the English language, the New Testament in particular. Who caught up with him? The Inquisition. They caught up with him. He was caught, and then he was burnt alive at stake with his translations. They threw his translations into the fire to burn him. There are many examples, hundreds of examples, where Inquisition was responsible for burning people alive. This guy, either witches as well. Okay, but I'm talking about heretics. Inquisition was particularly known for burning heretics alive. And who were the heretics? People like William Tyndale, a scholar. He was a scholar par excellence. He was burnt at stake. People like Michael Servetus, who wrote a book in 1553, was burnt alive in Geneva. Not directly by Inquisition, but Inquisition was looking for him. He was burnt by John Calvin in Geneva. So the list goes on and on and on. The final point I want to make before I finish is that some of these Christian missionaries, some, not all, I met lovely Christians around the world, loving people. I've been to the homes, I went to the US, I had a debate with James White, and I met lovely Christians. They came, they shook my hands, they appreciated what I did. They were very, very compassionate people. They are not represented by these people, people like Bob and other Islamophobes you see in the park. They are just like those so-called martyrs of Cordoba. These people are extremists. And all they want to do is spread hate against Muslims. That's all the job is. They will not come and preach the gospel. They will not talk about the love of Christianity, the compassion of Christianity. They will talk about hatred against Islam. Okay? And then say, oh, no, we don't want to spread hatred against Muslims. But how can you spread hate against the seed and not hate the fruit? How is it possible to break the seed from the fruit? You cannot hate the seed or a tree and not hate the fruit. That's not possible. So you make people hate Islam, okay, unjustly, okay, in a way that's biased and prejudiced, and then the outcome is hatred against Muslims. And that's when attacks like Christchurch attack and other attacks take place. So thank you very much for listening to me. There's a lot we can talk about. My voice is gone. It was a long discussion, a very difficult discussion with someone like that, but I had to keep patient. Thank you so much for listening. Walhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Those of you who are listening, please keep in mind that we have no agenda to lie to people. We're not here to misrepresent facts. The sources I mentioned, I request from every single viewer out there, go and read those books. I want you to read those books. Once you've read about, I think I must have mentioned 10 books, or maybe 15 books at max, right? Go and read them, and then you will see light. Let me see what I'm talking about. Start with Professor Thomas Arnold's Preaching of Islam. Preaching of Islam, and you will see what Islam did to the world. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.